On my honor, I will never betray my badge, my integrity, my character, or the public trust. I will always have the courage.
Welcome to episode number 57 of the On the Blue Line podcast. We call this Monday Morning Roll Call, and I am your host, Wayne Mulder. This week, fear is the enemy. The Monday Morning Roll Call starts now. So, first and foremost, let me tell you, if you are listening to this as a podcast, just know that it is also available on YouTube. So, all Monday Morning Roll Calls, as well as the Mulder Minute, and a new show that's coming out, Positive Police News, all of those are available on our YouTube channel at On the Blue Line. So, just a real quick advertisement for you, but if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, On the Blue Line, make sure you go do that as soon as this is over, and there are links in the show notes. So this week, more of a serious conversation again. Being Easter weekend, I wanted to go a little bit deeper into a subject that I had talked about in a Mulder Minute probably a week and a half ago. And it was the subject of fear. You know, I'm going to get a little preachy in this episode, so you're going to have to forgive me. I guess if that bothers you, there are other podcasts, but hopefully I don't lose you. In all seriousness, though, that I'm going to talk about the spiritual side because we are coming out of Easter week and there are some things on the subject of fear that I wanted to talk about. If you've been listening to this for any length of time, well, one of the things that I want to point out is that I try to talk about the physical, the spiritual, the emotional, the mental, because you are all those things, right? You are and I am, as human beings, we encompass a lot of different areas. And if we neglect any one of them, if you neglect the physical, if you neglect the spiritual, the emotional, you're out of balance and things will go awry over time. So just something to think about as to why I'm go over these different topics and why I have these type discussions. But, when I sit down and do these Monday morning roll calls, I'll occasionally get the question, how do you come up with topics for Monday morning roll call? Well, it's funny or it's interesting. What I do is I first do a Google search. I usually look specifically for something along the lines of positive police news, something that is uplifting, that gives me some sort of content or some idea to play off of. And of course, I very rarely find anything positive out there, thanks to modern media. So that's part of what we're doing here. That's exactly why we're doing the YouTube channel, and some of the things we're doing is to try to push out this positive police news that's out there each and every day from people just like you and I that are on the front lines. But the other thing I do is I kind of pray about it. And if you don't pray or if you don't believe in prayer, that's up to you. But I kind of pray about it because this is a mission for me. It's something that I'm trying to help other people in this line of work. So it's important to me that they're not my words. It's not necessarily me coming to you and just having this great idea that Wayne had. This would be a very boring show if it was all based on that. No, it's based on things that I think are applicable and that I believe will help you if we put them in our life. So this week, I got thinking about the timing of this pandemic and the fact that we just came through the Easter week. And as you're listening to this, yesterday was Easter Sunday. And, the thought came to mind for me. If you think about the disciples, and if you think about Good Friday, and when Jesus had died and he was put on the cross and then was, buried. If you think about that time frame, and you think about what must have been going through the disciples' heads, right? I mean, even if you're not a church person, whatever, just think of this in general terms. Here's somebody that they had spent years with, that somebody they traveled with, somebody that they'd seen miracles. They'd seen the lame walk again. They'd seen the blind see. They'd seen all these different things, and they heard the things that he was saying. But in this moment, it all seemed lost. It all seemed over. There had to be some fear, right? There had to be some trepidation. There had to be some concern there. Something was starting to bother them. And they didn't know in that moment, and they wouldn't know until Sunday. Because as the old-time preacher man said, when things are going really bad, Sunday's on the way. When things are, seem like they're insurmountable and you're not going to win, Sunday's on the way. And that is kind of the way it was for them. The media and parts of the government, they want you to be afraid. They thrive on fear, don't they? I mean, that here in the last few weeks, If you go through any of the apps, which unfortunately I do because of what I'm trying to build here. So if I'm going to look at news and try to present positive news, I have to go through a lot of news to find it. So, and unfortunately, I see over and over again this negativity, this push towards trying to get people to fear. And I understand there are legitimate things to be afraid of. For me, I'll be honest, early on, when this whole pandemic started, I wasn't that concerned. But as I saw more and more law enforcement officers in my age group, some of them just 2 years younger, some of them sergeants and a year older, I began to get a little bit concerned, if I could be completely honest with you. And then come find out that somebody that works at in close proximity with my wife may also have been diagnosed with it as well. So when those kind of things happen, fear naturally sets in because we're human, right? So a few statistics for you. As of last Monday, 21 officers, law enforcement officers in the United States have died as a result of the coronavirus in the United States. According to the CDC, as of the date that I recorded this, which would have been about 4 days ago from when you're watching this, there were 427,460 cases in the U.S., with 14,696 deaths, or roughly 3.43% of the 427,000 had passed away. So if you take the figure that there's 327 million people in the United States, that means 0.130642% have contracted the virus, and it means that your chances of dying out of the population as a whole is 0.004491%. Now, first of all, if you are a friend or you have a loved one who is one of the 0.004%, all the statistics in the world don't matter. And we've lost cops, and by all accounts, good cops, due to this and due to their willingness to hold the line during this pandemic. So losing one is too many. So I want you to understand that. But I also want you to understand that what we're talking about here is fear. Right? So what is fear? Fear, we all know what it is, but to articulate it, is defined as an unpleasant emotion caused by the belief that someone or something is dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat, or a feeling of anxiety concerning the outcome of something or the safety and well-being of someone. And that's what's going on here, right? So what happens when we have to deal with fear? What's something we should consider? Well, there's a few things, and this is what some of the experts say, but number one, when it comes to this kind of thing, when it comes to fear over something like a pandemic, you got to keep the danger in perspective. You know, we as law enforcement deal with unknown threats all the time, right? Anytime you do an unknown risk traffic stop, which is really any of them, you don't know what the risk is. And yet we don't walk around with our guns at low ready. We don't walk around with a taser out all the time. That would be foolish. We wouldn't do that. And why wouldn't we do that? Well, because it doesn't make any sense. We have to be cautious. We have to work within our training. We have to be smart, but we don't have to be afraid all the time. And I get that this is an unseen enemy, which makes it a little bit different, but the principle is still the same, right? So the number one thing is keeping the danger in perspective. Consider those statistics. Your chance of getting the coronavirus in the U.S. is very low. Now, I'm sure somebody, the mathematician in the group that's listening to this, is like, yeah, but that doesn't take into account if you're in an epicenter area where the statistics are much higher and more people have it, then your probability goes up. I get all that. And listen, that's not really the point here. It's just statistically, we have to keep the danger in perspective, right? So the second thing is to be vigilant, right? So again, we're not forgetting that the danger exists, but we're going to be vigilant. Use caution, but don't fear. Graham Allen, he put out a great video that I'm actually going to link up in the show notes that you ought to check out, that had it was a YouTube video of a New York doctor. And he started out with talking about how afraid he was when he first started seeing the people coming into the hospital that he works at and starting to see what was happening. But the same thing, once he started looking at the statistics, and then once he started looking at the things that we can do, his knowledge made him less afraid. You know, he went over in that video, and I encourage you to watch it, where he talked about, just washing hands and being careful not to touch the face and a lot of this common sense advice. And as he went on, he really started to point out that at first I was scared to death, And then I realized that there wasn't anything necessarily to be scared of as long as I was cautious and as long as I used these common sense things. As he says, COVID-19 is not a death sentence, nor is it a guarantee that you're going to pass it on to someone else. Now, he goes over some other concerns. He goes over concerns with, if you have a vulnerable population living in your residence and some, concerns there. But it was very interesting, the points that he made, that in the beginning he was scared to death, but then knowledge helped fight that fear. So another thing, when we're faced with fear, is positive action. Several experts that I looked up, and again, I'll put their articles in the show notes, they talked about just activities that we can take on. Activities such as exercise, journal writing, promoting positivity. Lots of times a good way to deal with fear and uncertainty is to intentionally put in its place positive things. Do physical exercise. Just because you're locked down at your house, if a lot of you guys listening to this are in law enforcement, you're not locked down at home. But on your time off, that time that you used to maybe go out wherever and hang out, if it's not in a social distancing environment, I know a lot of you guys ride motorcycles and you get out there and you do all sorts of activities like that you can absolutely still be doing. But if that's not your situation and you are locked down, you can still exercise, you can still do journal writing, you can still do positive activity that's going to help to offset that concern. And then lastly, and probably most important, and the key of this entire point that I wanted to make, is remember what you can control. The message of Easter, that fear and death were overcome. And that's the message, right? That we no longer have to fear. Sunday came. And because of that Easter Sunday, there was no reason for fear because he championed over fear and death. So we as cops, we like to say that we're never afraid. When people talk the fight, flight, or freeze, when people say, we always say that we're going to stay in the fight. But this conversation that you and I are having right now isn't with your buddies in a bar, and it isn't when you're getting ready to do defensive tactics in the academy. It's not that hot call that you're driving, 3 digits to with your adrenaline through the roof. No, this is just a conversation between you and me. And in this conversation, we can be honest with each other. We can tell each other that, hey, listen, sometimes I am concerned. Sometimes I do fear that I may contract something and bring that home and that it could affect my wife or my children. We can be honest with each other. And you know what? It is okay to be concerned. But, just because you are concerned, you don't have to worry. We don't have to give in to the fear because there was someone in control. Somebody is in control. And because of that Easter so many, many years ago, we don't have to give in to fear and worry anymore, no matter what the so-called news thinks we should be doing. So brothers and sisters, be safe out there. There are things to be concerned about, but we don't have to give in to fear. So I encourage you this week to keep that in mind. I'm pulling for you, I'm praying for you, and if you ever need anything, feel free to reach out. That does it for this week's Monday Morning Roll Call. I'll see you next Monday at Roll Call, and in the meantime, I'll see you on the Blue Line.